and one is a reflection of the other. Where else do we see this evidence? Don't we, before every one of our actions, say qurbatan ilallah, that we are seeking proximity to Allah, again showing that we are moving towards Allah or trying to move towards Allah. Now we already established that this movement and this journey and this proximity is not a physical one. However, it is a spiritual journey that each one of us are taking in order to manifest Allah. Finally, we use this phrase, and it's in there in the Quran as well, that I am doing this fi sabilillah. What does sabilillah mean? In the way of Allah. Once again, we're talking about a path. Qatilu fi sabilillah. Fight in the way of Allah. Anfiqu fi sabilillah. Spend in the way of Allah. So this established that we are on a journey. And definitely we are progressing and we want to progress. So let's move on to now our second question. How is it that we define and we measure progress? It's a word that we use all the time. Once again, when we look at the definition, when I talk about progressing, it has to be relative to something else. Progress has to be relative to something else. If I am progressing, there has to be a goal that I am progressing towards. But there are two factors that are involved. One is, if I want to measure my progress now, I have to see first, am I moving in the direction of my goal? Number one. And number two, how quickly am I moving? How fast am I moving towards that goal? These are the basic ways that we measure progress. If any one of them is missing, it doesn't count as progress. If I don't have the correct goal, or if I'm not moving in the direction, I should say, of that goal, I can move as fast as I want. All I'm doing is moving further and further away. And this is why Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells us that in order to find that goal, to make sure that we have the correct goal, we are in need of what we call basira. Basira is insight. The Imam tells us, and I'll quote to you what the hadith is saying. He says to us, العامل على غير بصيرة كالسائر على غير الطريق. The one who acts without basira is like one who is not even walking on the path. Why? لا يزيده سرعه السير من الطريق إلا بعدا. The faster he goes, the further he is going away from his destination. Now, we have already established our goal. At the beginning of the series, we talked about how our goal is ma'rifatullah, knowing Allah. And that wasn't just knowing in the mind, it wasn't just knowing by seeing, it was a knowing through embodiment. It was a knowing through actions. It was a knowing through being and manifesting Allah's qualities. The path to that goal was nothing but ibadah. To live in a way that I am recognizing that I am owned by Allah in terms of my actions, my position, and my very existence. But there's a few points that we want to mention now, which will help us to determine progress in a better and more precise way. Sometimes progress is seen only in terms of speed. But when we look at the hadith, we see there is another more important factor than just the speed or the quantity. What is that? If you remember when we were discussing the keys, we said one of the keys that Allah gives us through the Imams, this is in the words of Imam Baqir alayhi salam, أحب الأعمال إلى الله عز وجل ما داوم عليه العبد وإن قل. The most beloved of actions in the eyes of Allah is that action. Notice he's not giving you the name of the action. He's saying it's that action that you are consistently performing even if it is little. So one thing to keep in mind when we are measuring progress is how consistent are we in our movement to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see this in different ways, both in terms of the religion as well as in our nature. For example, we may fall into the trap when we are receiving Quran. We may one day feel, oh, I need to get closer to Allah. There is a vacuum in my heart, a spiritual vacuum. And I decide to recite pages and pages of the Holy Quran. I recite so much Quran on that day that I get tired of it, and it happens that A week later, I still haven't picked up the Quran again. A month later, I haven't even looked at the Quran. If I happen to go to the masjid on a Thursday night, I recited Surah Yasin, but otherwise, I haven't picked it up. Allah is saying, no, Quran is good, but be consistent. Make sure that you are reciting every day. It may be a little, but make sure you're reciting every day. And here we have to make sure that we don't fall into the two extremes. On the one hand, we're not reciting huge amounts that tire us out and are at the expense of other duties. On the other hand, we don't say, oh, look, I'm going to recite this one verse and I'm going to think about it the whole day. No. Quran, like we saw in yesterday's, in the topic of the timetable, there is a portion that is allocated for ibadah, for the mustahabbat. The recitation of the Quran needs to be something that is daily. Just like I have a slot for when I go to work, when I go to school, when I eat my dinner. All of these have certain slots in the timetable. The Quran should have a slot. It shouldn't be something like, oh, if I have time, then I'll dedicate 5 minutes to reciting the Quran. No. It has to be there on a daily basis. And we are reciting a little, but we are consistent. Where else? We see this also in namaz al-shab. Sometimes we may feel, oh, I'm feeling so spiritual today. I am going to wake up 2 hours before Fajr. Now I'm going to recite so many du'as and recite namaz al-shab. And the next thing I know, I'm so fed up that I don't touch namaz al-shab again for the rest of the year. Or sometimes it comes to charity. Sometimes I want to pay charity. I pay so much charity, one-off, but I don't pay again until the next year. Laylatul Qadr is so important to pay charity. I pay all my charity on Laylatul Qadr. I want to, if I pay on Laylatul Qadr, they say it's 82 years worth, right? Better than 1,000 months, that's 82 years, that's a whole life. If I pay my charity on Laylatul Qadr, I don't have to pay for the rest of my life, right? It's not like that. The point is that we're supposed to be paying on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. Some sort of continuity should be there because it's supposed to remind us. And this is exactly why we have the 5 daily prayers. When we think about it, I know when we were young, maybe some of the adults are still thinking like this. We used to think that, oh, if only I could pray all 5 prayers at the beginning of the day, then I've got nothing to worry about. Right? If only it was that easy. But the whole point of salah is that we are constantly being reminded of getting closer to Allah. And this is as the hadith said, that if you were to bathe 5 times a day, is there going to be any dirt left on you? There isn't. Okay? So the salat is supposed to be for that reason. Now, it's not just in our religious actions. Our nature is like this. Are we able to say, for example, I am going to sleep for this week and stay awake next week? As much as we'd like to, we can't do that. Our body doesn't function that way. I'm going to eat for 3 days continuous, and then I'm going to not eat for 3 days. Even when we are exercising, don't we do the same? If I'm doing too much exercise one go, it's even dangerous for me, right? And so we have to make sure that we're doing things consistently. You want to put on that muscle? The gym trainer will tell you, make sure you're coming every day, every other day. Don't come one day and then leave it for a week and 2 weeks. It's not going to work like that. On the other hand, maybe most of us are on the other side. We're trying to lose weight, aren't we? Again, you can't say, oh, I'm not going to eat anything today, and then next day you're binging away and eating as much as you like. And so this idea of consistency is there. It's there in the religion. It's there in our nature. What else do we need to keep in mind when we are discussing progress? When we've talked about progress so far, it's been very much at an individual level. I'm saying, how much am I progressing towards my goal, which is ma'rifatullah, through this path of servitude and ibadah. But progress can also be measured at the social level. You see that society has different factors which they measure their progress against, right? For example, progress in society is when you have more security and more peace. You have more economic stability. You're looking after the environmental factors. Education and literacy is prevalent in your society. There is employment. All of these are indicators of progress in a society. However, just like we don't see the dunya and the akhirah as separate, we also have to make sure that we don't see the individual and the society as separate. We can't say that as an individual, I have been created for ma'rifah and for ibadah, but then there's all these other things that I need to make sure that the society is heading in and going towards. There has to be a link. What is the link between individual progress and the progress of a society? It is the fact that when we try to progress in society, we are trying to create an environment that allows every individual to meet their goal of creation. I'll say that once more. When we try to progress in society, we are trying to build that environment that will allow every individual to reach the goal and purpose of his life. And so there has to be a link between the two. When I talk about peace and security, it's with this aim. It's not a goal, it's a means towards something higher. When I talk about economic stability, the same thing, the environment, all of these things, education, and a lot more, health and well-being, all of these things. You and I are constantly praying for the reappearance of our Imam Sahib al-Zaman alayhi salam. If I were to ask you, why is it that you're praying for the reappearance of the Imam? What's the first thing that comes to mind? The first thing that comes to mind is justice. The first thing that I want to say is, I want the Imam to come back because he will establish equality and justice and peace on this earth. But think about it. Why is it we want justice on this earth? Is it a goal of its own? Is the only reason I'm praying for the Imam to come so that there was justice in the earth? If there was justice in this earth, then I wouldn't even need the Imam then. No, I am praying for that wali to come and rule in this world and establish an environment that is the best environment for me to achieve my purpose. And that is why we're praying for this justice. We want this justice, we want this equality, we want this environment that will allow me to move towards my goal and everybody else to move towards their goal. But I'm going to take it one stage further now. We're seeing the individual progress to be linked to the progress of society. Society is very big. We don't always operate at a social level to that extent. A lot of the time we are working in our own communities. We've got different activities. We've got different projects. Once again, at every beginning of every project, we need to ask ourselves these questions. That what is the goal of my project? What is the goal of this activity? And if in the sort of hierarchy, my project, my community's activities are supposed to be the stepping stones that are linked towards the progress of society. Progress in my project should be resulting in the goals of the society. And in turn, the goals of the society should be leading to my own progress and the individual progress. And so we see this link of community, society, and the individual. Now, what are some of these activities that we might be involved in? For example, we organize Majalis. Let us not fall into the trap of just organizing things without thinking. We need to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? Is it linked to the goal of society? Is it linked to the goal of the individual? I may put out a job fair, careers advice, careers training. I have to make sure that this is a means for example, the education of the society. The fact that there is economic stability in the society. When that is established, that will allow all the people in the society to achieve their goals. Tutoring our youngsters, having youth clubs, sporting events. Sporting is not the goal. As much as we would love to play and watch sports, that cannot be the end goal. There has to be something beyond that. We can have the fun, but it should be leading us somewhere. So that's the second point. The first was, you could tell me the first point. We are not moving just as individuals. You're moving as society. And number two, we're moving as a community, and they're all linked together. Now, another trap that we might fall into, and this one's a very dangerous one. Have you ever heard the term the ends justify, the ends justify the means? What does that mean? The ends justify the means. The ends justify the means that sometimes I have a very lofty goal, but the methodology that I adopt in order to reach that goal is not necessarily the right one. But I justify the methodology path that I take to that goal because the goal is a lofty one. In other words, what I'm trying to point out is the difference between doing the right thing and doing things right. When I'm doing the right things, it means my goal's it's the correct goal. Doing things right, for those of you who have a software background, you know this phrase. Doing things right meaning to make sure that the path, the methodology that I adopt is also correct. It's not the case that I try and achieve something lofty, but I use the evil means and the wicked means and the malicious means to reach that goal. And both of them have to be there, not just one. Both of them have to be there. So let's take a few examples of where I'm doing things perfectly, but it's the wrong goal. The methodology that I've adopted is perfect. I'm doing things right. But is it the right thing to do? Let's take an example. Now, these are hypothetical examples. You can relate to it in your personal lives, in your communities, by using something similar. Let's say, for example, I put out an advert to teach the youth French. I have French classes in my community. And I make sure I get the best teachers, the best books, the best facilities are there so that the youth of this community can learn French. I'm doing things perfectly, but is it the right thing to do? Is French really required in this society? As I said, it's a hypothetical example. Maybe it is required, I don't know. Normally we would adopt something like Arabic, and that would be much more preferable in order to understand our language and take us a bit further, inshallah. Or for example, I go to a community and I organize a Hajj workshop. I train them to become mujtahids in Hajj. They know the ahkam in and out, even though they haven't been. But this is a community that can't even afford to go for Hajj. I'm doing things right, but is it the right thing to do? I'm not meeting the needs and the goals of that community. I offer counseling services. The statistics, the worldwide statistics tell us that marriages are breaking down. There's disputes between husband and wife. I go to a community and I bring the best counselors. And they are very experienced. But little do I realize that in this community, the people aren't even getting married. There is a block for people to get married. The young people need training, they need to understand, they need facilitation for them to get married in the first place. That is what they need. So once again, I was doing things right, but I wasn't doing the right thing. Final example in this section, I organize a women's career day. Where? In a society where families are falling apart. The families of this community need to make sure that their children are given the best tarbiyah because they're getting diverted and they are digressing from their goal. But instead, I am promoting the women to go out to work, whereas this society needs the mothers to pay more attention to their children. That's again, doing things right, but not doing the right thing. Now let's switch it. Where is it that the goal is correct? I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not doing it the right way. For example, we have a goal that Muslims need to be rich in the countries that they live in. They need economic prosperity. And if they are well off, then they will be able to spend their time focusing on other things. When a person is poor and they're constantly focusing on the bread that they have to eat that night, they're not able to focus on other goals. And so it's a very lofty goal to make sure that there is economic stability in the community and the society. But what is the path that I take? I start making investments into haram investments. I go through cheating and money laundering. The goal is lofty, but I'm justifying the means because of that goal. That is not progress. Progress is only when both the goal is right and the methodology is right. My child needs to be well educated. I want to send him or her to the best universities. Again, it's a very lofty goal to educate our children. But I am sending my child to a university somewhere where the environment is corrupt, where I know his or her religion is in danger. They're going to get peer pressure, they're going to get influence, they're going to come back with a very weak belief. The goal was very lofty, but the means was not correct. So how do I measure the progress? How is it that I know that I am moving in the direction of the goal? How is it that I know that how fast I am moving? How consistently I am moving? How is it that I know that there is this link between my goal of the community, the society, and the individual goal? How is it that I know that the methodology that I have adopted is also suitable, not just the goal? And the answer to this is in 2 words. These 2 words, I'm not sure how many of you will have come across, but I will point you in a direction where you'll be able to know more about them. These 2 words are muraqaba and muhasaba. Muraqaba and muhasaba. What does it mean to do muraqaba? Muraqaba means the idea of watching over yourself. When I wake up in the morning, when I start a project, when I'm interacting with people, there is a part of me that's watching over myself and making sure that I am constantly observing what Allah wants me to do. What is muhasaba? Coming from the idea of hisab, meaning that I am constantly taking account of myself. At the end of the day, I look back and see, what have I done? What have I not done? Where has this reached? Don't we do this in all other things? Don't we see that when we hold a project, whether it's a financial project or another project, we see, oh, did it meet the needs? How close was it to the goal? We have a self-evaluation, we get feedback. Same thing. If I'm managing to do it in all my other activities, but I'm not doing it for the most fundamental goal that I have, then there is a problem. Okay? And we'll come back to this, inshallah, in one of the other topics that we will tackle in the next few days, inshallah. So muraqaba and muhasaba, the place that you can look into this more is the first hadith that Imam Khomeini, may Allah bless his soul, brings in his compilation of the 40 hadith. Translated into English a long time ago, the first hadith is on jihadun nafs, and he brings these 2 concepts. The first thing we understand is he's brought it right at the beginning. It's the first hadith because it's the most important. And then he gives us the ways of how we are able to traverse this journey of getting closer to Allah. And these terms, muraqaba and muhasaba, are the ones that are used by the urafa and the ulama of akhlaq. So this is something for each of us to look into, inshallah, afterwards. Please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let's move now on to the modern day misinterpretations of progress. When we were analyzing ourselves and the dunya, we realized that we are a 2-dimensional being, and that I'm consisting of a soul and a body, and it is my soul that is going to continue on, and so my focus needs to be more on the home of the soul, which is the akhirah, home of the body, which is the dunya. Now, that's all well and good at the back of my mind. But what do we see around us? When we are constantly bombarded by advertisements and propaganda and all sorts of things, it is focusing purely on the material aspect. Progress in society today is measured purely by material progress. Tell me, when you are watching something on YouTube and you get those irritating adverts that keep propping up, one thing I found is in the UK they have a skip button. After 5 seconds you can skip. Over here I'm struggling to see these. You have to watch the whole thing and then you go on to what you need to watch. But how many times when those adverts came up, Was it talking about internal progress, success because of the soul? I see signs, alhamdulillah, in some of the roads that where there is faith, there is no worry and these kind of things. But there's one-off things around the town. When it comes to social media, the focus is never on the soul. You'll never see, forget Islamic terminology, even using other religions' terminology or general terminology, there is no focus at all when it comes to inward progress or inward success. Everything is about the material world. The primary one that you will see these adverts coming about is comfort and pleasure. Worldly pleasure and comfort. The whole world now, for some reason, is trying to find eternal bliss and comfort in this world. Even though at the back of our mind, we know that we are not created for this world. This is not the place for eternal comfort. But what do we see? We see an advert will come for some food, for example. Forget the food, it'll be a bottle of ketchup. They show a bottle of ketchup or chili sauce, and they show a child smiling away in front of his mother as if he's just won £1 million. This bottle of ketchup is being presented to us with material pleasure as if, you're entering Jannah if you try this bottle of ketchup. And there's other things. Food is one. We have booking a holiday. They'll be running around on the beach and showing you that, this is what life is about. You're stuck somewhere. If you don't come to this holiday, then you have lost out in terms of success. There's no progress in your life. This is the holiday that you need. And success lies here. Another example is the example of wealth. If you remember, we talked about each of these when we were discussing the life or the worldly life. When it comes to wealth, what do we see? Invest in this savings account and you will have the most beautiful retirement. Come to this uni and you will get the best job and make the most money. These are the things that we are bombarded with. Reminds me of a story. The story is of this businessman. The businessman has been working all morning and he decides to take a 10-minute lunch break. And he goes to take a walk down the beach. Maybe it's Bandstand. And he's walking there and he comes across a fisherman who's lying there in the middle of the afternoon. And he's caught 5 or 6 fish and he's done for the day. He's relaxing. So he decides to taunt this fisherman. And he says, "Don't you know it's only noon? You've already retired for the day." The fisherman says, "Yeah, I caught the fish I need for today, so I'm relaxing." He goes, "How silly of you. Why don't you go and catch more fish?" So the fisherman says, "What will I do with all these fish?" Now the businessman's thinking like, what a silly question. You catch more fish, you can sell it and get more money. But what will I do with this extra money? The businessman is thinking like, what is wrong with this guy? You get this extra money, you'll be able to buy a boat. What am I going to do with this boat? If you have a boat, you can go further into the sea and you can catch lots more fish. What am I going to do with all these fish? Now he's thinking like, why am I not getting through to this guy? You sell these fish, you'll be able to buy an even bigger boat and fishing nets. What will I do with these big boats and fishing nets? You'll be able to catch even more fish. What will I do with all these fish? If you manage to sell these fish, you will be able to open a fishing enterprise, a fishing company with thousands of people working under you. What will I do when I have this fishing company? Then you can just sit and relax. And now the fisherman turns around to him and says, "How stupid of you. You want me to work day and night for years and years just to do something that I'm doing right now?" And the businessman thinks, wow, I never thought of it that way. But he just shrugs his shoulders and he moves on. How many of us are like that businessman? At the back of our minds, sometimes somebody comes and tells us something. That no, progress is not in that way. You don't need so much. This is the direction you need to go in. But we just shrug our shoulders and we move on. We continue running around in our rat race, our daily rat race, and keep going after these material things. Sometimes it's not wealth, it's about position. Success means to become the president, to become the manager, become the professor in the university, having that prestige. Unfortunately, the bombardment is just to men, it is also to women. If you go back to the 1920s, in the 1920s, when the Industrial Revolution was taking place, there was a huge movement to try and get the women liberated. The women would come out in protest to say, we want to be free, we want equal rights with the men, we want to be able to work just like the men work. Little did they realize the reason for this movement. At that time, a lot of the work was being done in the factories, and the factory workers were not very satisfied. They had long, hard work to do, but they were being paid very little. And so they were forming unions to try and rebel or revolt against these factories and the people who were in charge of them. At that time, the movement was made so that those employers could employ cheap labor. If we are able to get into the mind of a woman that home is not the right place to be, if you're in the home, you're somebody low. If you come out and you work, that is progress, that is success. If they feel they've moved from here to here, then we'll be able to employ them for cheap labor. And this is exactly what happened. Protests start happening all around the world in order for women to get the equal right to work. And to add salt to the wound, there was a man by the name of Edward Bernays, and he was hired by the tobacco companies, one of the American tobacco companies, in order to boost the sales of cigarettes. And what he did is that when these protests were being taken place by the women, he paid certain women to be at the forefront of these protests with a cigarette in their hands and to be smoking whilst these protests were being recorded and televised. And he brought about a term that these are the torches of freedom. And this was a way of these tobacco companies to start making more money and make it okay for women to also start smoking. So my brothers and sisters, we need to make sure that we are aware of the different things that are happening around us. When we are told progress, we need to make sure that we are going for the full progress, not just for a one-dimensional progress. What is another thing we're bombarded with? Technology. Technological advancement. The next iPhone, the next Android, the next laptop. We want to make sure that we are at the top of the range. There are queues outside the Apple store overnight in order to get the new iPhone on that first day. Why? Because that is success. Is technological advancement bad? That's not what we're saying. But when it becomes the only criteria of success, then it becomes a problem. Because now my life is being governed by technology, my technological progress. Sometimes we ask this question, then why is it that in the Islamic world, we're not seeing this progress in technology? If Islam is supposed to be well-rounded, then surely there should be progress in technology as well. But firstly, that's not true. If you look into the history, a lot of the modern day, the scientific advancements are sourced in Islam. Number two, a lot of the progress that is happening in the Eastern and the Islamic countries is happening, but it's not being seen, it's not being shown. But let's say, for argument's sake, there's not as much progress happening as there is in the Western world. The example of this is you going on holiday and renting out a villa. When you rent out a villa, you go to the villa and you see it's a 3-story villa, a bungalow in your words, right? And you enter the ground floor and you see that there is a massive games room over here. And you get so occupied by the games room that you forget there's another 2 floors. There's a kitchen to enjoy my food. There is a bedroom for me to rest. There's even a swimming pool outside. But all I am doing is becoming an expert at the PS5 and the table tennis and the snooker and whatever else is in the games room. Technological advancement in the Western world is like this, that the focus is solely on here. If you're only going to be focusing on one thing, then naturally it is likely that you become more progressive in that one area, but at the expense of everything else. Islam is saying, don't consider one-dimensional progress. You are Khalifatullah. Khalifatullah means that you manifest Allah in every dimension, not just in one dimension. The last one, and perhaps the most important one, is that of beauty, physical beauty. Today, success equals beauty, and beauty equals success. Now remember, we talked about how Hollywood is not entertainment, but is education. And we talked about how we have to be careful at what we expose ourselves to and our children to. We watch these movies in order to relax ourselves. But little do we know that it is shaping our minds, and it is also shaping the minds of our children. One of the movies that was released last year was the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie had huge marketing and it had a huge box office rating. But what is the Barbie movie showing? What is it depicting? It is trying to show that progress and success as far as a woman is concerned lies in her beauty. That's not the only thing, but that is one of the things. Today, women and young girls are obsessed about their physical beauty. I wasn't able to bring the stats, but the stats are horrific. This is the only thing that they are spending time in. The Western world is showing them that it is your beauty that is the pinnacle of your perfection. It is the beauty that makes who you are. And as a result, even the boys are suffocating because they're witnessing things that they're never ever going to experience. They're trying to find a life partner, but they're being bombarded with these things which don't really exist. On the other hand, Islam is portraying hijab. You want true liberation? Hijab is true liberation. Why? Because when a woman comes into society wearing the hijab, she's not saying, I'm not concerned about my beauty. My beauty has a place, but it has a certain place. It's not for you. You are not going to judge me based on my beauty. That's not what makes me. You're going to judge me on my morality. You're going to judge me on my intellect. I am going to cover my beauty in front of you so that you are not going to try and rate me or judge my progress and success based on my beauty. It is my morality that makes me. That's what I identify as. It is my intellect that I identify with, not the beauty. Now, all the above is good. All of these things in their own place is good. But like we said, we want to be competing for the higher things. When Allah says, سَابِقُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ وَجَنَّةٍ عَرْضُهَا كَعَرْضِ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Yes, compete, progress in different ways, but go for the higher things. Go for the maghfirah. Go for the Jannah that has been promised for you. And what we have to realize and what society has to come to terms with is that these measures of progress, sometimes they stunt real progress. Many times they stunt this real progress. If our Islamic measure of progress is in manifesting all dimensions of Allah's names, then how is it if I'm constantly just going after comfort that I am going to manifest patience? How is it that, for example, I'm going to manifest courage? How is it that I'm going to manifest forgiveness if there are no troubles in my life? And that is why Allah tests everybody in their own way. And so we have to make sure that we are aiming at the higher things. These things, when they are in their place and they are a means to the higher things, then they have a place. And that is why we need to compare ourselves to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Progress has a criteria that we need to measure ourselves against. When we look into the Quran, we see this phrase coming very often. When Allah talks about the mu'mineen, it says, لَهُمْ دَرَجَاتٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. They have ranks near their nurture. That means that there are certain ranks that they have to climb. But the question is, what are these measured by? But there's one place in the Quran where it doesn't say lahum darajatun. It says hum darajatun indallah. They are the ranks. And we look at the tafsir, and these are none other than the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. If we want to compare ourselves and measure our progress, we have to measure ourselves against them. Just like when I want to measure the length of something, I use a ruler. I want to measure the length of this table. I use a ruler which has the marks on it, which are my benchmark, which are the criteria. Allah is saying they are the rulers. They are the benchmarks against which I need to compare myself against. When we live in this materialistic society, and I'll end here giving you just a prelude to what we are going to continue with. Because the view of modern society is purely material, it cannot see beyond the material. What does it see out there? It sees nothing greater than the human being. According to the materialistic world view, there is nothing that I can see greater than man. If I follow that through, there is nothing greater than man, and so either God must be man or man must be God. If God must be man, I fall into the trap that the Christians fell into. They could not see something beyond the human being, and so they had to see man incarnate. But what modern society has fallen into is the opposite. And that is that man is God. Everything revolves around the human being. And then that has moved on to individualism. Everything revolves not around the human, it revolves around me, about what I want, my pleasures. So it is time for us to take a reality check and see what are the measures of progress that are occupying our minds. With it, that we can try and make a bit of muraqabah in order to reach our understanding of progress. Tomorrow we will move on, inshallah, to seeing how we can progress in religion and what that means. And we will identify one of the core dimensions that we want to discuss tomorrow when it comes to progressing in our religion. And inshallah, we'll take that forward through the concept of Tawheed tomorrow. So in summary, we have established today that we are all on a journey to Allah, to liqa'ullah, to qurbah. Progress is defined by our goal. Moving towards that goal, am I in direction? And how consistently and how fast am I moving? We want to monitor our progress, we have to do this through muraqabah and through muhasabah. There are many modern day misinterpretations of progress, but these are material only. And what we need to do is also see what is the progress of religion, which we will inshallah continue with tomorrow. Please recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. I remind you of the words of Imam Hussein on the night of Ashura, when the companions are pledging their allegiance to the Imam before they become shaheed the next day. The Imam says and he declares, إِنِّي لَا أَعْلَمُ أَصْحَابًا أَوْلَى وَلَا خَيْرًا مِّنْ أَصْحَابِي. Verily, I do not know companions who are more loyal and better than my companions. ولا أهل بيت أبر ولا أوصل من أهل بيتي, nor a household that is more righteous and more committed than my household. فجزاكم الله عني جميعا خيرا. So may Allah grant you the best of rewards. Tonight is the 5th night of Muharram. We are halfway through the Ashra. Tonight we want to take note of some of these companions. Who were some of the first great companions that Imam Hussein had on the day of Ashura? We know that there are some like Zuhair and Hur who joined the Imam later on in their journeys. But there were some who joined the Imam very early on, and they were right there from the beginning. One such person goes by the name of Abu Thumama. Abu Thumama was a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He was one of those that was residing in Kufa, and he wrote a letter to the Imam inviting him. He was there with Muslim, and he was one of those who managed to escape Kufa when the time came when Ibn Ziyad tried to block all the roads outside of Kufa. One of the outstanding and brilliant acts of this man is what? That during the battle, it is noontime, and he looks up at the sky, and he sees that it is time for Salah. So he goes to the Imam and informs him of this. And the Imam looks at him and says, "Oh Abu Thumama, you have remembered the Salah? May Allah make you of the Musallin and of the Dhakireen, those who are counted as the best performers of Salah, and those who remember Allah. Truly, I say to you, my Imam, how is it that these companions in the hardest of times, in the harshest of moments, were able to recite and remember Salah, where likes of me so easily make excuses for not praying on time? Who else is there? A man by the name of Sayyid bin Abdullah al-Hanafi. Sa'id is one of these great companions that is there on the night of Ashura. And when he is pledging his allegiance to the Imam, do you know what he says? He says, "Oh Imam, if I knew that I were to be killed and I were to be resurrected, then I were to be burnt and my ashes scattered in the wind, and that were to happen 70 times, I am ready to stand alongside you and sacrifice my life for you so that your family can be saved." According to the reports, Sa'id was one of those men who, when the time of Salah came, he stood in front of the Imam as a human shield. We know that when Abu Thumama reminded the Imam of the time for Salah, they asked the enemy for respite. But the cursed people did not give any respite. And so the Imam is forced to recite Salatul Khawf with his companions. And there are a few who volunteer to guard them and stand in front of them as human shields. As the Salah begins, the arrows start coming from the enemies. And Sa'id is standing there, acting as a shield. Sometimes he's able to catch it on his shield, but when he can't, he puts his own body on the way. The Imam finishes the Salah, and the companion can no longer take it. Sa'id is now full of arrows. Just as the Imam finishes, he falls to the ground. And he calls out to Allah. And he says, "Oh Allah, curse them the way you cursed Aad and Thamud. Give salams to the Holy Prophet, your Nabi, and tell him and inform him of the pains of my wounds. For I have done this just for the sake of your pleasure and to protect the family of Rasulullah." Again, I say to you, Imam, how is it that these companions were able to become shields for you? Whereas I, on the other hand, not only am I not a shield for you, But I am the one firing arrows at you. For every act of disobedience, the Imam of our time is receiving an arrow. The Imam has no one else. The Imam only has you and I. But every time I slip, every time I make a mistake, every time I choose to disobey Allah, I am not the shield, but rather I am the arrow towards this Imam. The final companion that we want to remember tonight is a very special person. This is somebody who is there from the childhood of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He is a childhood friend. Not only is he a companion of Amir al-Mu'mineen and of Imam Hassan, but he is somebody who used to follow Imam Hussein around. When they used to be children, he would go after the footsteps and take the dust of the footsteps of Imam Hussein and kiss this dust. Throughout the whole journey that unfolds, we see that Habib has a pivotal role to play. We start in Kufa. In Kufa, again, he is one of those who is writing letters to invite the Imam to lead them. He is one of the first to give the bay'ah to Muslim ibn Aqil. But when Ibn Ziyad, the cursed Mal'oon, comes and starts creating terror in the town of Kufa and starts blocking all the escape routes, somehow he manages to escape. Now we don't know exactly how he manages this, but him together with Muslim bin Awsaja, they managed to escape. Some of the reports claim that he sent his slave to wait for him with the horse outside Kufa. And he told them that wait for me and I will join you. The slave is waiting and waiting, and Habib is delayed. And so the slave even has been done tarbiyah of by Habib. He looks at the horse and he says, "Oh horse, if Habib doesn't come, then I am going to ride you and I will meet Imam Hussein alayhi salam, our master, on behalf of Habib." The days of Muharram begin. Lady Zainab alayha salam is looking at the enemy. By the 6th of Muharram, it's no longer a small army. By the 6th and the 7th of Muharram, there are more and more soldiers joining the army of Umar Sa'd. But she looks at her own army, the army of Imam Hussein. Why is nobody coming to join and help Imam? There were thousands of letters written from the Kufans to the Imam. But the Imam just wrote one letter. He writes this letter to Habib and he titles it, or he starts with it saying, Min al-Gharib ila al-Habib. From the lonely one to Habib. Habib is there now. Habib has come. Oh Imam, you are no longer Gharib. Habib is here. There is elation in the tents of Imam Hussein that Habib has now joined us. On the 9th of Muharram, the day before Ashura, Umar Sa'd is very keen on starting the battle. He comes with his horsemen towards the tents of the Ahlul Bayt. And when Abbas alayhi salam sees the commotion outside, he informs Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein tells him, go and find out what they want. Abbas rides with 20 horsemen. Amongst them is Zuhair and amongst them is Habib. When they reach and they start conversing with the enemies, a time comes when Habib speaks to Zuhair. And he says, are you going to speak to them or shall I speak? Zuhair says, you were there from the beginning. You speak to them. Habib tries to admonish them and says, how is it that you are going to be able to stand in front of Allah tomorrow when you are going to murder the children and the family and the progeny of Rasulullah? But all these words are to no avail. We see that the day of Ashura comes. The morning of Ashura has arrived. After the Fajr prayers, the Imam starts to organize the army. He has 32 horsemen and 40 foot soldiers, according to one narration. A small army of 72 men only. What do you think is the state of the women in the army, in the camp of Imam Hussein? The mothers, the wives, the daughters, the sisters, they are watching these enemies as they are about to butcher their menfolk. But we see that Habib is so ready for Shahada. After the Fajr prayers, he is heard making a comment in a very jovial way. Somebody comes to him and says, Habib, this is not the time for making jokes. Habib replies, what better time is there to be laughing when all that stops us from reaching the Jannah are the swords of these men? Amongst the first of those who are martyred that day from the camp of Imam Hussein is that beloved friend of Habib, Muslim bin Awsajah. When Muslim is dying and breathing his last, both the Imam and Habib go to Muslim. The Imam speaks to him first and he recites that famous verse, مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَضَى نَحْبَهُ وَمَنْ منهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. And from them are those who have fulfilled their covenant, and from them are those who wait, and they will not be deterred. And then Habib speaks to Muslim, and he says to him, if I were not knowing that I am going to join you very soon, I would ask you for your wasiyyah. Muslim looks at Habib, and he is pointing at Imam Hussein, and his only words are, Usika bihada. My only concern is that you protect this man. It is as if they knew from the beginning that one by one they are all going to leave Imam Hussein alone. At midday, they are trying to pray the salah. They go and seek respite. Habib hears one of the men on the other side retorting them. When they say that they want a chance to pray, the man says, your salah will not be accepted. Habib gets furious. He speaks out to the man and says, you think your salah will be accepted and the salah of the son of the messenger of Allah is not going to be accepted? The man gets angry and a battle ensues. Habib fights furiously and bravely. He manages to knock this man on the head and he falls to the ground. This man by the name of Ibn Tamim. He is there on the ground and the other enemies come to his aid. It is said that Habib manages to kill up to 62 of the enemy, but eventually he is struck to the ground. As he goes to the ground, he tries to get up once more, but Ibn Tamim is there and he strikes him on the head again, and eventually he falls down and he reaches Shahada. What we are told in Nafasul Bahmoom by Sheikh Abbas al-Kummi is that the people who killed Habib, they are now competing with each other. They have severed the head of Habib and they are trying to take the glory of who is the one who killed Habib. They take his head and they put it and string it around their horse and parade it amongst the people that they are the ones who have severed the head of Habib. I say to you, Habib, your head was paraded in front of the people. But when we look at the beloved head of Aba Abdullah, not only is the head of Aba Abdullah on a spear, not only is it paraded through Kufa and Shab, but eventually this beloved head, it reaches the Mal'oon, it reaches him in the Darbar. The drunkard Yazid is presented with the head of Imam Hussein. It is not just shown to everybody, but he is taking a stick and he is playing with the teeth of Imam Hussein. It is this head of Abu Abdullah that is presented to his daughter, which eventually causes her to pass away. Oh Habib, you were there for Hussein all the way. Not for a moment did you move away, but Hussein now stands in the desert all alone, attacked from all sides, no mercy is he shown. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, wa saya'lamu alladhina zalamu ayya munqalabin yanqalibun. We pray to Allah to give us the tawfiq to transform ourselves in these days of commemoration, to help us identify our goal, not to delay and to move swiftly towards our goal. We pray that we are better able to understand the dunya and the akhirah. We pray that we are able to maximize the dunya for the sake of the akhirah. We pray for the reappearance, the hasty reappearance of our Imam Sahib Zaman alayhi salam, and that he grants us the opportunity to be alongside him as his agents and his soldiers. We pray for the relief of the oppression all around the world. Anything that has come to you which is good has come to you from Allah. Let's gift the thawab of these majalis, the anbiya, to the awsiya, to the sulaha, to the shuhada, to the ulama, to our teachers, to our parents, to our families, and to all those who have a right upon us. And let us remember the marhumeen with the Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha.